The following are 5 mysterious disappearances where the people were never found, asking the question whether they were sucked into another dimension. Number 5. Martha Wright. In 1975, Jackson and Martha Wright were driving from New Jersey to New York City. The two were driving through the Lincoln Tunnel in New York City when they noticed there was a large amount of condensation on the car's windows. The couple then pulled over and Jackson went about wiping the fog off the front windshield while Martha took care of the back. Jackson then turned around to see how his wife was doing and found that she was gone. She was nowhere to be seen, even though she'd been there just moments before. Jackson would claim that he had not seen or heard anything unusual, and it would have been impossible for her to get very far in such a brief amount of time. Police were never able to find any evidence of foul play, and Jackson was never considered a suspect in the disappearance. Martha Wright's sudden disappearance remains a baffling mystery. Number 4. Owen Parfitt. Owen would always be recounting stories of his glory days in the swashbuckling early 1800s and would tell tales of his wild youth where he claims he was a pirate and was involved in great battles and had numerous women. But it appears that by the time he reached his 60s, his raucous past had caught up with him. At that stage, he was totally disabled and living with his elderly sister in Shepton Mallet, a town in southwest England. For a man who claimed to have had a fast and furious life, being disabled must have come as a heavy burden. But it seemed his adventurous life would not stop there, and what was about to happen to him became part of folklore in Shepton Mallet and the neighbouring villages. Owen Parfitt would go on to have one final adventure. In about June 1763, on a warm summer evening, Owen Parfitt wanted to sit outside, but was not able to do this without the help of his sister due to his severe disability. With the assistance of his sister and a neighbour, they carried him out into a chair onto the front porch. His sister then walked back into the house, believing her brother was now sitting safely outside, taking in the warm breeze. A very short distance away, across the other side of the road, several farm workers were labouring within full view of Owen sitting in the chair. The workers were so close that if someone had approached him or something untoward had happened to Owen, they would have immediately noticed. A storm was starting to brew, so Owen's sister came out onto the porch to bring him back inside. But to her total surprise, he was no longer sitting in the chair, or anywhere else for that matter. But he was no longer in the chair. Where was he? Because he could not have moved anywhere by himself. She asked the farm workers if they had seen someone come get him, but none of them had. He had completely disappeared and nobody saw a thing. Panicking, the sister enlisted the help of the farm workers and the neighbours to search the area. It wasn't possible Owen could have left on his own, so wherever he had gone could not have been very far. After a frantic search, this totally disabled man had completely vanished. As time passed, the locals' imagination would run wild, where they believed that he'd been taken by the devil, or that pirates had taken him off in order to get him to tell them the location of buried treasure. Owen's incredible disappearance was never solved. In 1813, some routine construction in Shepton Mallet unearthed the human skeleton, where everyone believed this great mystery would finally be solved, and that it must be Owen's remains. Unfortunately, the discovery would lead to another sad story, as the skeleton was that of a young female. In 1933, there was a major construction in the area, but alas, nothing was ever unearthed, so no new light was ever shed on Owen's disappearance. To this day, in southwest England, his fate remains a complete mystery. Number 3. Benjamin Bathurst. On the night of November the 25th, 1809, a British diplomat by the name of Benjamin Bathurst and his courier by the name of Herr Kraus were on their way to Berlin in order to get back to London after an important trip to Vienna. At the time, Benjamin Bathurst was travelling under an assumed name, pretending to be a commercial traveller. On the way, Bathurst made a stop at the town of Perleberg, west of Berlin, in order to get new horses and to have a meal at a nearby inn called the White Swan. After ordering an early dinner, Bathurst is said to have spent several hours riding in a small room set aside for him at the inn. The travellers' departure was delayed, and it was not until about 9 p.m. that they were told that the horses were about to be harnessed to their carriage. Bathurst then told his assistant he would go out and wait in the carriage so that they could continue on their trip. Kraus followed shortly afterwards. As the courier approached the carriage, he could see that the door to the carriage was opened, but Bathurst wasn't there. In fact, he was nowhere to be seen, and there was no sign of him anywhere. So where could he have gone? Even though he had been there just seconds before. News of Bathurst's disappearance did not reach England for some weeks until Kraus arrived there to give them the news of his disappearance. Bathurst's wife, Philida, immediately left for Perleberg to search for her husband, accompanied by the explorer Heinrich Röntgen. They arrived there to find that the authorities had been looking into the affair and that a Captain von Klitzing had been put in charge of the investigation and took immediate steps to mobilise his troops and conducted a vigorous search. On the 27th November 1809, the Englishman's valuable fur coat was discovered hidden in an outhouse owned by a family named Schmidt. Then, on the 16th of December, 2 old women came across Bathurst's trousers. A reward of 500 silver coins was offered for any news. In March, Mrs. Bathurst had the entire area of Perleberg searched at vast expense with the use of trained dogs, but her efforts were to no avail. She then travelled to Berlin and then Paris under special safe conduct, since Britain and France were then at war, to see Napoleon himself, hoping to obtain from him some account of her husband's fate. However, when she was received by Napoleon, he declared that he knew nothing and was not involved, and even offered his assistance. In the end, no definitive trace of Bathurst would ever be found, and he was never seen again, seemingly erased from existence. Number 2. Louis Le Prince. French inventor Louis Le Prince is known for his contributions to cinema, and the first person to ever capture moving images on film, and is considered by some to be the father of cinematography. On September the 16th, 1890, Le Prince boarded a train to return to Paris after having visited his brother in Dijon. On the train, Le Prince was last seen entering his cabin and checking his luggage. When the train reached Paris, Le Prince did not disembark, and a train conductor was sent to his room to rouse him, thinking he had fallen asleep in his cabin. But when the cabin was opened, it was discovered that both Le Prince and his luggage were gone. A complete search of the train turned up no trace of the man or his belongings, and no one could be found who could recall Le Prince ever leaving his cabin once the train had departed. What makes this story so intriguing is that the train had made no stops between Dijon and Paris. He could not have gotten off anywhere, and the cabin windows had been closed and locked. Le Prince had just disappeared. Additionally, there was no sign at all of any foul play, and no reports that anything had been amiss during the trip. One theory is that it was a murder set up by Thomas Edison, who would go on to take credit for inventing motion pictures, as Le Prince had already been in possession of plans for this invention long before, which he had been hoping to have patented in America, and would have if it had not gone missing. Number 1. Bruce Campbell. In April 1959, Bruce Campbell, 57, was a New England stockbroker from Massachusetts who was travelling by car with his wife, Mabelita, to see their newly born first grandson. Their son, Bruce Jr., was an assistant professor of chemistry at McMurray College in Jacksonville. The long drive was hard on Campbell, and he began feeling sick while he was in the car, where he suddenly became confused and disoriented. And when they arrived in Jacksonville, Mrs. Campbell checked them into the Sandman Motel. They parked right outside the guest room where Campbell was put immediately into bed after they checked into the motel. His son arranged for Dr. E.C. Bone, a local physician, to visit his father. Dr. Bone gave him some medication to help him sleep, where it took 2 hours for Campbell to show some signs of improvement. On the evening of April the 14th, Campbell and his wife visited their son, who observed that although his father was rational, he appeared to be disoriented. After visiting their son, they returned to the motel. She later woke up at 2:15 a.m. and saw that the other bed in the room was empty and her husband was gone. She immediately got out of bed to look for him, and when she realised that he was not in the bathroom, she went to check outside, where she found the door unlatched. There was no sign of him in the parking lot, and the desk clerk on duty said that he'd not seen anyone walking past the office. The Campbell's car was still sitting in the lot, where the doors were locked. Bruce's clothes were where he'd left them the previous evening, and his suitcase had not been touched, so if he had left the motel room, he would have done so in his pyjamas, which would have been very odd. He'd left behind his personal belongings, including his wallet with all of his money, which again made absolutely no sense. Mrs. Campbell quickly called the police, who searched the surrounding area, but there was no sign of Campbell. The next morning they searched the local creeks, farm buildings and wells, and surveyed the entire area by aircraft and later by helicopter. They found nothing. The next day, local firefighters joined the search, using a boat to dredge Movesteer Creek. About 150 students from McMurray College joined the search too. On the third day, the entire 235-member male population of McMurray students and staff joined with 50 students from Jacksonville High School to help comb the area. But Bruce Campbell was never found.